Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies.
Hey Table Talk listeners, it's your editor Audrey over here with a little post-production announcement. This week's episode is all about horror through the games we play at our tables, situations we encounter in storytelling, and real-life phobias. Content warnings with timestamps are listed in the description of this episode. Please take care of yourself and feel free and empowered to skip over sections or pause the episode if you feel overwhelmed by the content. Happy and safe listening, fam. And now, back to the show.
Alrighty, and we are live with another episode of Table Talk. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. And yet again, I have a wonderful guest episode for you today. I'm going to hand it over and give us a little introduction about yourself and where people can find you and what you do.
Oh, hello. I am Sarah, or Sarah is Coffee, pretty much everywhere on the internet, except for Instagram, which is a cruel mistress. So I'm Sarah _is Coffee there. Rip. I am a content creator, a community manager, and generally just a menace when it comes to TTRPGs. So very happy to be here.
Incredible. And you are amongst good company because we are also menaces out here.
The core brand.
Yeah, I actually got to meet you at PAX at your horror panel.
Yes.
Which was great food for me because I was coming off of the tail end of like our character arc, which was Mariah's character arc, and it was very
Because of course
like
it was.
horror esque.
Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah. So I loved having the chance to talk to you there, and now Mariah gets a little chance to dive into it.
I know. That horror panel is like, I was being chronically ill back in our like Airbnb.
No.
And so that horror panel has like haunted me. And ironically, like, why was I not there? Because I had to just like go be like, I'm going to stare at the ceiling for 2 hours and then I'll put on clothes and go like to the mirror and be a person.
I understand the ceiling stare.
I was done.
That's so real. Every time I have a panel at a convention, I literally have to take hours beforehand and be like, you will be okay in time for this. So that's
Yes.
very understandable. But yeah, that was a super great panel. I love every person that I was there with. And I was very thankful and humbled that I was included because they are like horror all-stars. So it was a really great time.
Yeah, they had a lot of like, I remember me and Johnny were just like furiously jotting notes the entire time because it was a lot of good like info.
Johnny was sending like live tweeting it to me and I was like, yes, Bean, I love you so much.
It was so good. But yeah, give me a little bit about your experience with like horror and TTRPG.
Ooh. That's so exciting as a question. Because my actual like little backstory with horror is as a child, I was scared of literally everything.
Same.
Yes, could not handle it. Like I think a story I often tell is one time I was laying in bed at night and I put my hand up in front of my face and then made a scary claw and then I couldn't fall asleep.
Oh, I feel that. Listen, I feel that.
Could not be scared. And then I think some point in like my late teens, it had to be late teens, a switch flipped in my brain and it was like, you're not scared of anything anymore. Just go for it. Have fun. And I was like, oh, thank God. And I watched a ton of horror franchises, got really into it, got into the classics, got into the moderns. And then a couple of years ago, I never really got too much into Vampire the Masquerade or Werewolf by Night. Is it Werewolf the Apocalypse?
Werewolf the Apocalypse, yeah.
Yes. But I got more into like niche horror TTRPGs and also people just introducing the concept of, hey, did you know that it can get scary at the table instead of just being an adventure? And that hooked me in so heavily and so quickly because the concept of fighting against your lack of knowledge or exploring things that make you personally uncomfortable in a safe environment was like,
yeah,
just
it's a different level.
Heaven. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in a safe and like emphasis on in the safe environment. And that was like a big focus at the panel. And I remember I had questions for you like after the panel where after like Mariah's arc, there was a little bit of like me struggling behind the screen, but like causing that level of discomfort in my players, and like knowing this is like something that was asked for, they're all having a good time, but like me being a people pleaser and seeing like physical discomfort being caused by something I'm saying, and then having to battle with like that inner voice of like, hey, maybe I should back off. And I'm like, no, I need to go harder because this is what we're here to do.
Mhm.
And like that was my first stint into doing something scary at the table. And
Awesome.
it was an interesting like mental battle that I had to like ensue there.
And it was interesting for me too, watching it, because I know you so well, and so it's like I was I was in character, so my character was uncomfortable, and then so was I. It's just like a human that's experiencing this, and then I was also watching Ale and like seeing you waffle a little bit, and like trying to kind of like there were moments where I would pull it in a little bit to be like, no, we're good. Like I'm not having a real breakdown. This is fine. This is just this is consensual.
That's
those
so
kind of,
good.
but it was like it's a really interesting thing, and I have a similar thing with vampires as well, of like figuring out. We've not really gotten too in the weeds with horror. I've like dripped in some things that are just disturbing. And like one of my players is a Zamitzi. So I was like, do I have free reign to do whatever fleshcrafty shenanigans I want with your sire? And I'm like, yes. So right now it's a little bit of it's like, oh, there's a flesh amalgamation shelf and books in the back. But like the steps are laid to like for shit to get a little weird.
Amazing.
But yeah, figuring out like when you actually are doing that, it's like how far is too far? And then like, you know, beyond like lines and veils of it's like, yeah, it's all something we've consented to experiencing, but it's like in the moment, temp checking that and knowing like when to pull it back or when to go for it.
100%. And I think that's where I don't want to use these specific words because they often invite discourse, but that's where you can really look at the system that you're using and see how it either maybe facilitates things too much, or because any system can have horror in it. You know,
For sure.
I've run a system where people were mice, and it was a grid hex crawl where they were mice trying to find a new home. And there's so much good unexpected horror in that because a hawk is inherently terrifying if you are a very small mouse or a snake.
You're very small. A lot of things are terrifying.
Yeah, a lot of things are terrifying. But I think the reason that I actually have stayed away from a lot of systems that market themselves specifically for horror is because some of the mechanics that I find in them, I don't actually find super compelling for safety mechanics.
Yeah.
Like Vampire the Masquerade has a lot of like secrecy within it. And I, as a player, a way that I love to facilitate safe horror is secrets inside the table, no secrets outside the table.
Yeah.
So, you know, we all are fully in on what's happening and our characters can then experience things. So
for sure. Yeah, I do a lot of that too. I know like there's one like our friend Bex wants to run, I believe it's like Outbreak Undead. It's like a zombie thing, which like zombies for me are like one of those things where I don't know why it freaks me out so much. I don't know if it's the concept of like if it's like a visceral lizard brain thing of like being a person that is then no longer what makes us a person. And it's like that's a little too just close to the bone for my brain, but it's like something about zombies have always been viscerally terrifying for me, and they provoke my insane night terrors. So like I can't watch The Walking Dead really, not because the show scares me, but because I will have dreams that I'm being eaten, and that's bad for me.
You don't need that. You don't need that in your life.
Yeah, it's just my brain just hey, what if we made it 10 times worse? I'm like, why friend? Why that? But like there was a discussion where it's like, oh, would we play ourselves? And I'm like, I can't, because what I can't deal with is my like loved ones or turn into, or like you're like, oh, your childhood dog's a zombie dog now. No, I can't have. I'm so sorry, I can't have that.
No way. Yeah,
and like
100%.
That's a weird one where I was like, oh, that could go off the rails really quickly.
I think even that system also like warns against it. Like,
don't do that.
Recommends that you don't play yourself.
Well, okay, so unfortunately, you've brought up one of my favorite systems, and we won't go too much into the zombie part of it because, again,
we can
we're staying safe
talk
here.
about it. I'm good. It's just like the visual of it.
That's so fair.
Discussing zombies as a concept, totally fine. Seeing them
Amazing.
like around and like eat people, slightly like less fine. But
Yeah.
I'm better than I used to be about it. I've watched enough like Resident Evil games. I've sort of
Also,
desensitized my brain to
desensitized
it.
yourself a little bit.
A little bit. Can't play them, can watch them.
That's me with a lot of horror video games, honestly. But no, the interesting thing about that system is it's an old system. You know, it's a system that has that like early crunch to it, you know, but it's so I've played a lot in that world, and it's so interesting that it does have mechanics for you to play yourself. It encourages you in certain places to like stat out what you would be as a survivor, but specifically for that play style, they're like, this is mechanical. There is no role play. It's a thought exercise. And it's only when you make like your own characters that aren't you that they're like, now you can have a little fun, which is such an interesting distinction to me.
Yeah.
So it's like scouting it out as yourself, but then obviously being like, this is Samantha or something. But her survival mechanics are like how I would have survived if it were me.
So like, am disabled, bad at athletics, have herbalism knowledge, better there.
Exactly.
I'm good after civilization has already reformed. That's when I can be brought out of the fridge.
You can be useful and helpful.
I just need to be put in a little cryo chamber and left.
Because those early oh, go ahead.
Those rough days are not going to be for me.
Those early days.
I want to think I could do it, but if there's one thing that system teaches, it's that like everyone eventually goes down. It is not a system where you play with your characters for a long time, which is I truly love systems like that for very specific purposes, not for all purposes, but I think that dice mechanics and systems can be a big source of safety work in games. I think we talked about that on the horror panel. Outbreak is specifically designed so that it's really, really difficult for you to succeed. Like, you almost always fail. And when you're put in the mindset of, I'm probably going to fail, it's somehow easier for your character to die.
Yeah, there's a liberation there because you don't have that, like, we're gods. Like it's going to be fine. Yeah. It's like, no, it's probably not going to be fine. So if it's fine, fantastic. If not, then that's kind of what you expected anyway.
And you follow
I think there's also like, I think there's also like a general element of anytime you go into something that's a little more horror based, you're like, hey, I can't get too attached to this person because I'm fully knowing what they're going into. And there's a very good likelihood that this character is not making it out.
Yes. There's also a big role, I think, with the person who's running the game. Like, I do this with our Fall of London game of like where I will full stop say like, hey, over the table, if you do that, you're going to be sentenced to the final death, my guy. Like, this is a point of no return that like I know more about the lore as like this person running the game. And so it's like, as my players don't know as much, I'm like, not to spoil anything. However, if you like have roommates that are human and you're not human and someone finds out, you would take the permanent sunshine nap.
It's a problem. You have touched on one of my favorite DM safety mechanics in horror, which is you can be the little butterfly at the corner of the screen being like, that action's going to have consequences. Like, that is not,
for sure.
That's not something that you have to be like, oh, my precious narrative. Like, you can say like, hey, that's going to be a problem without revealing too much. And a GM of mine does an excellent job with that.
Yeah. I've done it once at our table because it wasn't like necessarily a horror related thing, but it was a player being like revealing a big thing about saying that going into this ball that they would reveal something very big about their character in front of an entire court of people, including her very overbearing, controlling parents.
Oh boy.
So I was like, okay.
We had a chat about it. We're like, hypothetically, what would this campaign be? And it would no longer be a Strixhaven camp. Like, we wouldn't be at Strixhaven. Anymore.
I was like, there would be
on the lam.
Yeah, so many dominoes that would fall because it was one of those like it happened right at the end of our session too. So then whenever I like sat with it, I was like, what would happen if she ends up doing this? And I'm like, oh no. And so I had to have like a little chat where I was like, hey, I'm here to let y'all run a story. So if this is truly in your heart of hearts what you are wanting to do, by all means, but I just need you to know it's going to have very big consequences and it will shift our entire campaign. I'm down to chase this truth. This is where we're going.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to know the ramifications, and if that influences your decision at all, cool. If not, perfect.
If you put this bitch in sport mode,
then we're going to go in sport mode. Then we're going to go in sport mode. And that's fine. Because again, is that like, I as the GM, DM, whatever, like, I'm not here to bar y'all from pursuing any like avenue.
No. Yeah.
The world is malleable. You make choices. They have consequences. That's the nature of it. I'm here to facilitate a story. If I end up having to toss half of it over my fucking shoulder and just switch gears, then we're going to go that
That's why I don't plan, baby. I plan session to session because I don't know what the hell y'all are going to do.
I plan big plot points, and it's really not much skin off my back to just be like, well, I'm going to just wing it anyway.
Yeah.
But it is a good, I think it's a good thing to like sit down with your players whenever you do hit those moments. And you're like, you know, I know you're having a fun haha, but like I as God am telling you,
back.
Yeah.
Either
The hand of God is not
going full force.
Yeah.
Just letting you know what the options are.
And it's so helpful to like set expectation too, because you know, a player can really be looking forward to something and have a certain expectation for something. And when you as the GM are like, I'm sorry, that's not how things shake out, that can be very upsetting in the moment. So it's always really good. There was a situation one time, I think, where a player was very excited for a reveal and maybe hadn't anticipated the way that people would have reacted. And we were able to get together and be like, in this circumstance, we don't think that's how the reaction is going to be, but let's figure out how to get to that. Like, let's find the right path towards that. So yeah, that's excellent. I love that.
It's very interesting.
Do your favorite aspects of horror differ when you're running a game versus when you're playing? Or is it the same?
Ooh, so yes and no. The things that stay the same are some certain themes I like to tap into. So for me, what I find very satisfying in horror is dread, the lack of knowledge causing fear, and body horror, just straight up body horror. I like a lot. As a player, the way that changes is that I like to explore. Those are the things that I kind of revel in horror, like things that I just really enjoy experiencing with my players. When I become a player, it becomes more about the things that I find uncomfortable individually, but want to still explore. So for me, claustrophobia is a big one. It freaks me out, but God, I love it. Being one that I almost never explore, but I have a couple of times, is being yelled at. Can be very scary. With the right DM can be great. But as a player, I think I am very, very reckless in horror. I enjoy touching the button, grabbing the poison thing, eating the poison thing, just seeing whatever happens. And really, like, if a GM has an idea of something, I love having the little game of trying to figure out the most horrific thing that they have planned and trying to make that happen for them.
Yeah. Like, how can I Kool-Aid Man through this wall that you've set up for us to get to this extra room?
I really want you to have a good time.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And then as a GM, I think I usually end up just trying to pay a lot of attention to the things that people are, again, afraid of, but seem interested in, and then just leaning hardcore into that and hitting the gas all the way.
That's so dope. I love that element of, like, I think when you've like GM'd your own games, I find I do that a lot in games now, where I'm like, I'm also thinking in like DM brain in their point of view. So whenever there is like a little hint of something that they've casually dropped, I'm like, I'm going to go talk to this person that you like mentioned for 2 seconds, because I can pick up that like you kind of, that might be a point of interest or something like that. Or like, yeah, if you've like casually mentioned an object in the corner, I'm like, I'm going to go touch that thing or investigate it or figure out what the fuck's going on with it. Because now as a DM, like I'll catch the moments where like my players do just fully like bypass something that I might have planned, and it's fine. But then now as the player, I'm like, no, all these little things I want to go touch and interact with them, because now I know that you've probably planned something like around this, and I want to know what it is.
Yeah. And
And
it's
you
so hard to like plant those things and not just give them away. Because I want to share the information because I'm a little goss. So it's so hard to not just be like, hey, let me tell you what the thing is, even though
Yeah.
you got one success. And sometimes I just do because I'm like, I want you to know. I want to have
sometimes
this
they just gotta have the knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
very easy to persuade into secrets because I'm like, I am shitty at keeping secrets, especially from my friends who play at my fucking table. And the people I want to talk to most about the shit that's going on are them.
They're
I
right
can't
there.
talk to them. But it
Mhm.
sucks for me. But like, I also like want to harken back to how you mentioned like there's no secrets over the table, and there are secrets like in character. I have like a triple tier degree now. I'm like, there's
Yeah.
the stuff that nobody else but me knows, and then the player themselves, like the person that the secret is pertaining to, they can know some of the secrets and they can
But not
kind of be in
everything.
on it, but not everything. Because I still want to have them have like that moment of like,
Mhm.
oh shit. And I'll let them in on just a little bit, and that like scratches my itch for like, okay, you're kind of in on this with me,
Mhm.
Right.
and you're gonna help guide us in that direction when I start dropping shit, and you'll pick it up. And sometimes y'all don't pick it up, and then it gives me a lot of glee because I'm like, oh, you're not gonna see
Hey.
this coming, and I'm
Sometimes
gonna have
there's
a
a lot
genuine
going on.
moment. Yeah, it's so good. Like,
100%. And you
yeah.
have to have those secrets as a GM, you know, like that's part of what makes the game interesting and satisfying as a player is the discovery of a secret.
Mm-hmm.
I also love like our little like Ollie has her DM council, and I have our friend Oak and Kay. I call them for VTM my Primogen Council because that's like a VTM thing.
Amazing.
And so they're in there to just like bounce idea. We have like our separate half of the server that's just for the person running the game, and like those little tribe members to just do have machinations and like chat about stuff in the background. It's like we can go in there and I'm like, I need an artifact that they're gonna find because I sent them on a mission. I don't know what they're going to fucking get. And then it's like I can just bounce stuff off and come up with something. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I can take this to the game. And that's great because that kind of it helps with that little goblin. And the same thing of like I'm working on writing a horror podcast that we're gonna like a horror anthology podcast because Magnus Archives really rocketed me into loving horror. Are you also upset that
Yes.
Okay. Are you also like gnawing at the bars of your enclosure until that TTRPG comes out? Because so am I.
Yes. I also haven't finished the Magnus Archives yet. So
you gotta do it. I'm on
No.
a read. I just finished season 1 of a re-listen of like my third re-listen, if I'm honest.
Mhm.
But it's so good. I'm obsessed with it. Our friend Oak is obsessed with it.
Amazing.
But it really catapulted me into loving horror, and so now I'm very like newly into the world. But have it like I do with everything, no chill, full throttle, just like right on
who
in
has
here.
time to have chill?
None.
So it's nice to have like that little coterie to like write things up and be like, is this scary? Does this work? Like, especially as you're trying to plot out like how do you pull those strings in like a Magnus-esque bigger story that's an like audio drama kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like that's been really fun to start thinking about and sketching out the different things that are at play and like how all of it's
100%. Yeah, and you know, it's such a masterclass in terms of like Magnus Archives does such a great job having insular concepts and stories while tying in that overarching plot. That is maybe my favorite style of horror when you are episodic, because if you are just go on the plot all the time, then you lose momentum because you can't, there's no way to have that much content, you know? So
No.
I just really admire their writing.
I know, it's so good. They're writing
and I
very like good.
I obsess with the little hints that they drop in like all of the different, like I go full conspiracy board on those episodes because then especially because there's so many names and like specific things and like characters, and so like they'll casually mention somebody that's incredibly relevant down the line. So like even having another re-listen after you finish it, it's like a whole new experience all over again because now you know who these people are and you'll catch names. And I'll be like furiously Googling because I'm like, wait, I know this name. Where do I know this name from? I have to figure out where like they tie into
Yeah.
everything. And I love that shit so much.
Jerry Key, my son, my sweet boy, showed up in like the 3rd episode. Jerry and Michael are they're my children. Those are my sons. And I love them. Did you know that's that voice actor's actual laugh? When he laughs in life, that's how he sounds.
Terrifying.
Isn't that incredible?
Oh my
you would
God, that's amazing.
You could be at a stand-up comedy show with that man, and he would start laughing, and that would be the noise that came out of his body.
No. Oh my God.
Same.
No,
will you permit me to wax philosophical for a moment?
Oh, yeah.
Please.
And tie this back in a bow into TTRPGs is that
Please do.
something that I just think is so amazing about the Magnus Archives that it like embodies in horror is that it tells the story that horror is a game you cannot win. And anytime any victory that you have is like inherently Pyrrhic, like something is always going to be lost or sacrificed as a result. And I think that's such a good mindset to have when going into horror. Like that's why I enjoy like going full tilt into the thing that's gonna fuck me up, because in the end of the day, what I find as like, you know, D&D is a game that is essentially very geared towards you are the main character and you're looking to win. For horror systems, I find that it's a lot more interesting to be like, it doesn't really matter if I win, in air quotes, as a character or I triumph or prevail. The question I like to ask is like, did we tell a good story? And like, if I'm trying to game it the whole time, if I'm trying to like keep my character as safe as possible, that story is so boring. Why don't I pick up the cursed thing instead?
Yeah. It's also the interesting of like, even if you do air quotes, like win or triumph over whatever this horror is, it's like you said, it's like, what did you lose in that process? And like, it might be a win in the sense of like, I saved the world from an eldritch horror. I lost my fucking sanity to do it though.
Yeah.
Like I am no longer the person I was going into this.
Delicious.
And I think that's like, right. Did you actually win? Or is it just being put off for a time? Or did it become endings. Someone else's problem?
Yeah. Right. The worst / best endings. That's why I always really love mechanics in horror of like bleed and like there just being a certain point where you can't go on any longer. I love those mechanics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
definitely,
it's very interesting to have like we've started playing like more horror. Like we're about to do a Call of Cthulhu. We have like our session 0 coming up. We've done Candela with Talking XP, and like I'm a person that doesn't have a whole lot of phobias. Generally, at least common ones. We've had a whole episode where I talked about my inherent fear of like large groups of birds, but that's a whole other thing.
That's even so then I'm
fair,
like, though.
Even then I'm like, I don't know that it would cause like that visceral fear at the table the way. Not like I
heard that audio you sent me when that flock of birds swooped over your car.
But that's in real life.
They're there
on me.
That's fair.
Like
that's
I don't know that it would cause that effect at the table. If you
Unless
know
you like left a room and then there were a bunch of just like taxidermy birds that were just sitting on the table, like waiting for you.
You have to really do
like,
some hardcore immersive setting of the room for me to be uncomfortable.
Gentle cawing in the background.
Yeah, you just somehow find a bunch of refugee crows and you put them in your house. I will definitely not be entering.
That's fair.
But I do love like the horror games that I have been involved in. And I guess it ties to like me as a person. It's like that feeling of being incapable of like doing anything to stop what's happening. Because I'm a solution oriented person. I work well under stress, like all of those things. And I remember in our Candela episode, as soon as we got to the monster, because of like the bleed that I had taken, I went down literally within that moment. So I had nothing to do to help them. And I had such a fun time watching them struggle through all of that. But that feeling of like helplessness was horrific to me because I am like, I want to help people. I want to protect my people. And then going down that first instant and being like, all I can do is hand this broken broom to somebody and pass out.
Yeah. Boy.
It was so good.
Oh, that's so fantastic. And that's, you know, the joy of horror. That sounds wild. But you know,
that's what it is.
You know, it's not always jump scares. It's not always like, I can't go to sleep tonight. It's like sometimes things are just horrible.
Mhm.
And those can be their
Yeah.
own type of horror.
It's that real like loss of control and like, oh, actually, you were just a victim of your circumstance. And it's like that hits a close to like how you feel in life. Sometimes too, which I think when horror is done really well, it can do that in a way that's still safe and sane and consensual, but it can touch into those really like visceral things and help you kind of work through that as well, either by experiencing a place that's safe or kind of finding a way to overcome it. But
this is
it's so
our,
good.
our mandatory shout out to safety tools.
You gotta
you're
do
the
it to 'em.
best.
100%. 100%.
Gotta do it to them.
You have to do it to, you're legally required to do it to them regardless, especially if it's horror.
Especially horror.
Like, you gotta do it to them the expanded edition in horror.
Yeah. You're like these are the safety tools for the things we absolutely will not touch, and then the things that do scare you, but you are gonna have a good time while I rock your shit.
Yeah.
And like, what do you do if you're in the middle of something and you're like, oh no, it's rocking my shit too hard? Like
I wasn't prepared.
No.
Yeah.
I told her to take the gloves off, and the hands are handing.
They hurt.
Yeah.
It's
I've
so
been on
good.
some live shows where we've had to do some pretty quick, some
Like
pretty
shifts.
fancy footwork in terms of safety work, because you're doing horror, it's live, things are still going to happen. How do you make that okay? And so navigating those was always a really interesting thing. We had a lot of like hand signals to be very chill and quiet, and then the DM would just move past very quickly and we would address it afterwards. But it was really important because you never know what's going to come up.
Is that like discomfort you felt was happening at the table for specific players, or you felt like you were broaching, because it's also another element of like when you do things live or you do things for content creation for a big audience, obviously there's many people that will react a certain way to it. Is that something that you felt like you had to veer off because of like you didn't feel it was good for the audience, or because it wasn't good for the players?
It really can be both. I've been very fortunate to have GMs who are very, very considerate when it comes to staying away from topics that are just in general not appropriate for a live stream. I've had some really, really great game runners for those. But the biggest thing for a live play in terms of audience safety is just right at the top being like, this is going to be awful. This is going to be horrific. Prepare yourself and step away if you need to. And then the other things usually in live play are just matters of, something you can have all the safety talks in the world, and there's always going to be a chance that someone forgets something. I think that's the most common case of safety check-ins is that, someone just forgets because it's horror and you're exploring things. And so normally like our sign was just like a side of the nose, and it just looks very natural and like you're scratching your nose, but then they're like, okay, we're going on. Eye stuff is not for today,
Yeah, that's really smart. Because it is so easy, I feel like, to forget. Like, I think we have the things we kind of will go into safe talks. We're like, okay, like these are my ones that just are general. But sometimes like you will find things out in game.
Yeah.
Like add that you're like, oh, I gotta add that to the list now. Because it's developed in real time. It's never come up where like a very Baldur's Gate-esque thing where like you get that cursed lobotomy. And it's like, okay, I feel some kind of way about eye stuff as an example. And I didn't know I felt that way, but here we are.
Oh man, I've always had a weird time with like scenes where like things go into eyes. I have a thing with like things going into eyes and then like fingernails being like ripped off.
Yeah.
I think it's like I can watch somebody get like their arm chopped off, easy peasy. But I think it's because I don't have any like recollection of what that level or degree of pain would be. So I can't
I could never conceptualize that.
I can't associate with it. I have not lost a limb. I don't know what that feels like. But something getting poked in your eye or like something happening to your fingernails, like we've all had those like random instances of things happening. And so, or like teeth.
It's bad
too.
Teeth.
Because dentists.
Yeah.
Just the true horror of it all, dentists.
It's just dentists. Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
but
like,
like
I'm feeling the tingly feelings inside me with you even saying that. And I'm like, ooh, yes. Good. But like that is not the case for everyone.
The amount of times I've had dentists be like, do you need to listen to music? And I'm like, hey, my sister in Christ, you put a drill in my mouth right now. Music will not help me.
It's not doing anything.
Bach is not gonna stop this shit.
like, I believe in the power of music, and it cannot overcome this. Like, we
It's
just
not
need.
strong enough.
It's
Yeah.
not. No.
I can feel you drilling into my skull, ma'am. So no, we're just gonna.
That's bad to think about. Yes. It's like you shouldn't be drilling there. That's not for drilling.
No,
Yeah.
That's for
No.
staying undrilled.
those teeth are for my mouth.
Yeah, Volo's cursed lobotomy. I fully had to just like look away and
I'll
skip
also
through
look
that
away.
shit. I just look at like, what is my response? I'm like, okay, cool, that one.
Yep.
Yes,
I'm
that
good.
particular response. Yeah, who cares? Just
It was
Or,
it was the sounds too. Like they had no
yeah,
right to
the
put
sound
those
is
sounds
really
in
bad.
there.
Yeah.
How did they
Or,
find
like,
those sounds?
Yeah, or like Dead Space, how there's that one scene where like you have to literally control the needle going like towards the eyeball, and I was like, this
no.
is torture.
No.
You're making me do it to
No.
myself. That's
Oh
rude
my
as fuck.
gosh.
I'm not gonna play Dead Space. No.
Now you know.
Now I know.
Uh,
The more you know.
Yeah, but I had an instance where I found out real time in game that something wasn't good with me, which was that I am mostly not good with harm to children or animals. The one place where I'm like, oh, it's fine is like I grew up on a farm, so if someone's like, oh, there's a fucked up deer in the woods, I'm like, yeah, great,
Yeah.
that's fine. But something that I didn't consider was like mental or emotional harm being put on children.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
worse
happened.
than physical for me.
It's worse. It was happening to another character. So it was like a
Mhm.
playable character that this was happening to, but it was a flashback. And I had to be like, hey, I get that like this is a part of the backstory. So I don't want to take that agency away from you. You know, like that happened to your character. I'm not saying that can't exist in the world, but we gotta veil it. We gotta do that.
I can't be here for while it's happening.
I have to walk away. So that was a very interesting thing to like discover and be like, how do you navigate that when it's not like an issue of the DM is bringing something up and you're like, oop, can we not bring that up? It's like, oh no, there's a person who has like an invested interest in this being a part of their story. And how do you navigate around that? It was very interesting.
Yeah. There's a Magnus episode in season 5. I don't know how far you are in it, but it's a spiral-centered one that it's take place in a mental hospital. It's in like the 111s, I think. I watched that one when I wasn't in a great place mentally, and I was like, wow, I've made a choice that I can't take back, and I now have to deal with.
No.
And I was like at work. I was like migrating blogs to our new CMS,
right.
and also having a breakdown. And I was like, this is too much. Because it's the thing of like, oh, are your mental illnesses not like real? And being gaslit about your mental illnesses.
No.
And as someone with mental illnesses and physical chronic health issues, I was like, this is not even too close to home. You're in my bedroom.
You're
my social security card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, can we talk about how unfair it is that like for some reason, like physical illnesses, you tend to gaslight yourself out of even more than like mental stuff. Like I feel like I can acknowledge that I'm having a bad time in my brain, but if I'm having something going on in my body, I'm like, well, what if I'm a little piss baby about it though? Like, it's me.
Oh, I do that all the time. And mom's like, stop being a martyr. And I'm like, I'm just a stubborn asshole. I'm not being a martyr. I just get mad about it.
What if my pain tolerance is so high that what is not a big deal to me is actually like gravely wrong? Like my mom has that happen with her teeth.
That's true. Yeah, that's
like my mom has a lot of like dental issues. So by the time she starts registering that it's hurting to where she's like, maybe I gotta go get this checked out. They're like, ma'am, your tooth is about to fall out of your face. Like it's so infected. And she's like, that's crazy. But I have that worry because I'm like, my pain tolerance is really high. So I'm like, by the time I start feeling something, I'm worried that by the time I go check it out, they're like, hey, why the fuck weren't you here 3 months ago?
Yeah, if my appendix ever like tries to burst or something as I knock on wood, I won't know until the bitter end. Because like I was just like, oh, that's probably I had COVID. And I was like, wow, it's probably just my fatigue that I have all the time. And then I was like, maybe it's fatigue and allergies. And I took a test and I was like, oh, it's aggressively COVID. It turned positive like 2 seconds after I put the thing in there. And I was like, wow, that's a slap in the face that I didn't need. But okay.
That happened to my partner, so that's very real.
This is rude. Like, you have to turn positive that fast?
It's sassing you at that point.
Yeah.
I feel like I go all the way around back to the other side because I also have a very high pain tolerance, and then I psych myself out. And I'm like, what if I don't have a high pain tolerance?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm just experiencing a normal amount of pain. And it's like,
But you've just
Just
gaslit
me
yourself
being-
into thinking that you're like, I'm a warrior. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, you actually just have a, like, it's
Yeah.
like, no, ma'am, this is a paper cut. I've done that too. I've been
Yep.
on that. You stay on that carousel for long enough that you really do just
You just
spiral
go
down
all
the hell. It's so
I've
weird.
had like, we're talking horror, we're talking eyes, it's fine. I had broken toes at one point that I didn't
Ooh.
realize were broken because I was
That's
just like,
rough.
well, that's a normal amount of something.
Of
to be
toe
in,
pain.
you know,
That's
it's
just what
okay.
toes be.
And then a medical student saw them and was like, what have you done? I was like, it's fine. Oh, anyway,
Like that's not where toe bones go. That's not where those should be.
so sometimes it can be cathartic to experience pain in a fictional scenario because
can
you
be.
don't have to figure it out.
Yeah, honestly.
You're like, I know exactly what this is.
Yeah.
But
It's
Like, I
bad
don't
and
have
I
to-
know it because there's a 13 on that die.
We do that for
I have
real
a
life.
dice telling me how much it hurts.
I need that where just like a dice rolls like in neon above your like in front of your face when you hurt
Yeah.
yourself, and that way you
I would
can
love
tell if it's
that.
good or bad. That'd be great.
What's my
That would be
constitution
great.
save?
That's
Please.
like, you just get one of you get a nat one. You're like, I need to go to the urgent care.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like right now.
And then if you don't get a nat one, then it's like, hey, I can stay home. I don't have to go to the urgent care.
Both great options. I mean, urgent care, worse option, but at least you know you gotta go.
If
you
you
know?
gotta go, like in that you need to take it on down there. But if you can avoid it, maybe this I shouldn't give this advice. Don't go to the ER if you need to go to the ER.
Mm-hmm.
My body's fucked up and has been for a long time, and so I have different guidelines that I use that I wouldn't recommend people with not fucked up bodies use.
Hell yeah. And I
I mean,
mean,
yeah,
like,
that's-
Or when I hold a gun to her head and I'm like, I'm driving you to the ER myself.
Ollie has made the executive. It's like Ollie and my mother and like have made the executive decision of like, hi, we're going. Because
Yeah.
mine is like, hey, can I breathe and can I talk? Because if I'm
Mhm.
almost nonverbal, then it's like, well, that's gonna be problematic for like communicating. So I gotta go before we hit that point.
Yeah.
That's about it. Anything short of that, I'm like, what if I stay home?
I'm sure
a
it'll
heating
resolve
pad.
on its own.
Like I think a heating pad at home could fix this.
Okay, but heating pads do fix a
Heating
lot.
pads do. I don't go anywhere without a heating pad. If you see me with a suitcase, there's at least one heating pad in there. I promise
They're
you.
so good.
God.
I'm very much the same way. I have a plethora of little guys causing mischief inside my body is how I like to see
I
it.
like that.
And
That's
before
delightful.
it's it makes it whimsical, you know, it helps. But I just also am terrible at interoception, so I was like not thinking about how to take care of myself, and I think my partner was the first one who bought me a heating pad, and I was like,
It's magical.
you can feel okay.
Yeah, like
Ugh.
people who like don't. I'm like, how do you not have? What do you mean you don't have a heating pad? I'm like,
It's so
I have-
good.
There's one within 100 yards of me at all times.
I love having toasty toes.
God. There's no way to real segue it, so I'm just
There's
gonna
no. We'll just hard left
I'm
that back
grabbing
into
onto the steering
Horrorland.
wheel and just jerking us into a fucking rip.
Yeah, I was like, somebody do it, please.
Yeah, but as far as going, like taking it back to horror, you did mention something about monster design. How
Yeah.
do you approach that in a horror setting?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many different ways to approach designing monsters based on what system you're using, which I think is a very exciting thing to do, is to consider the system you're working with and then work within that. But the reason I love to talk about monster design is it's actually kind of halfway how I got into TTRPGs as a whole. Or when the pandemic hit, I had an okay following on the internet, and I said, oh God, I need money. Who wants me to make monsters for them and their games? And people were like, I will have you make
Mhm.
monsters. And so I got to like work in a lot of different systems and try to figure things out and understand how things needed to happen for people's games. And the biggest joy for monster design is when you go to create something. The first question you get to ask is, what kind of response do I want? Because if the only thing you're doing when you're going into monster design is saying, I want it to hit hard and maybe take out my characters, like that's not an enjoyable encounter. So you think about exactly what response you want from your players. Like, oh, do I want them to be afraid if you're in a horror game? Or do I want them to feel like maybe they don't want to kill this thing? Do I want them to feel a moment of doubt in the middle of combat? Do I want them to feel fully outmatched to the point that they feel that they have no choice but to run? And all of those things really build into how you create your monster. So for the first part, horror, if you really want to scare them, big mechanics that I like to build into monsters for things like that are effects that begin to happen before you even ever face the monster. So noise, sound, command of a large area of terrain that you can affect at will are really huge things in your toolkit to make a monster that can have this huge and terrifying presence before you ever set your eyes on them. And then for horror, once you set your eyes on them, oh man, you gotta pay. It's gotta pay off.
Yeah.
My biggest pet peeve in horror is when they set up something really great and then the payoff is so unsatisfying.
It's just kind of a little guy.
Yeah, just a little guy.
It's a little guy with a mask.
Yeah, that's like, hey.
I'm like, that's
That's
Steve from
not scary
accounting
at
with
all.
a little Hollywood Halloween mask.
That's Steve's like secret TikTok account. Like that's not scary.
The first horror movie I went to see when I turned 17, I can't remember the name of it, but it's not You're Next, maybe. But anyway, it's this horrifying movie that I was like so scared, peering through my eyes the entire time. And then the reveal, it was like people hunting people down in masks. And then when they took the masks off, just regular, degular guys.
Just Greg.
Yeah.
And that was like halfway through the movie.
I had that with the first Insidious movie. Of like, I watched it with friends and like everything leading up to where you see like the devil or whatever is so much scarier. And then you see him.
I was going to say
like
the same movie.
The comic of the devil. Now that thing that shows up in the pictures, horrifying. Hated that. I haven't seen any of the other ones, but I remember that specifically. I was like, is this the climax? Because I don't feel like
because it's so scary. Oh no, yeah, it wasn't the devil's, but the part, I don't know if this was the first or the second movie for Insidious.
It's okay. You can spoil something. I love a good spoiler.
The family in the living room with the unsettling smiles is something that has
I also don't like that. Yeah, that's some like Uncanny Valley shit. That one's creepy.
I don't like that. Yeah, but you gotta pay it off. You gotta pay it off if you're designing a horror monster. And the way to do that is honestly just to come to your players and be like, hey, what would be scary to you? And then put it all together and make it real good. When you want to like make people doubt if they should take out something, you should make it like integral to the place that you are in. So like, taking something out could destroy a city, or maybe it is very important to the ecosystem, or maybe you thought you were going to go have to fight this thing, but it turns out it's just corrupted. And now we have an extra quest. I always enjoy that type of design because gaming is inherently in a lot of ways it can be very violent unless you're playing a specifically only social game. And so finding ways to encourage problem solving outside of violence is always just very interesting to me. Especially for big old monsters.
Can I gush to you about the shit that I did to Mariah?
Yes.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so Mariah's character, when we came into it, we talked about her character being a reborn. And we
took some liberties with the reborn lore. She's kind of half, so she's a botched reborn, basically.
Yeah. So I had the lore behind her is that her mother was part of like some secret organization that she didn't know at the time, but that's why her whole family got kidnapped. And they were tortured and brutally killed.
And I handed Ollie to that on a plate at the start of the campaign.
Hurt me.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what she didn't know was that it's one of the deans at the College of Witherbloom, and it's specifically the Dean of Growth. So there's a Dean of Growth and a Dean of Decay. I took some liberties there. And so the only thing that she knew was that she woke up like in a lab somewhere, ran through a forest of like little bits of her memory, saw some scary like monster in the woods with red eyes, and then like kept running, found her way back to like someone like her family friends home who now became her legal guardians, and they like took her in and kind of helped figure out what the fuck happened a little bit and get some of her memories back.
Mhm.
But as far as what actually happened to her and her parents, she had no memories. And what ended up being is that it was the Dean of Growth who was also in that secret organization, but she was like a turncoat working for an enemy faction. And she was about to get found out by her mom, and she's like, "You're getting too close to the truth, so yoink." And while she's at Witherbloom trying to investigate and figure things out, she encounters the other Dean of Decay, Valentine, and she clicks together that he was the thing in the woods that like saw her that night, because he's a druid and he is
Mhm.
allowed to hunt at Witherbloom at night. Because he is this fun little amalgamation of just a lot of horrific shit. He is a
Yeah.
collection of everything that has ever
Amazing.
killed him. And
He's our
I love
horrifying
him.
little guy.
I love
We
him
didn't know
dearly.
that at the time, but
Yeah, they were like,
he's
it's
baby girl.
definitely the fucking Decay Dean who
Yeah.
looks like a monster. And I was like, he's just a little guy.
Just a little guy.
Just a little guy. And so he encountered her like in his class, clicked together that she's the girl he saw running in the woods like a year ago. So he tries to get her to meet him at Witherbloom at night, which is forbidden because he's normally out there hunting. So students are not allowed to like be in there. But he's like, "You're going to be safe because, you know, I'm the one in there. Like,
I'm not
Yeah.
hunting you.
I'm not hunting you. I'm the scary thing in there. I just want to talk." And so she goes, and I had this great moment of like, there were, the Dean of Growth was using like experiments with corpse flowers as a way to kind of get rid of a lot of the bodies that she was having to use to test out her like reborn necromantic magic. So she would just feed them to the corpse flowers so that she didn't have to like explain a bunch of bodies stacked in
Yeah,
a
Right.
so
place
she
somewhere.
get rid of all the bodies.
Exactly. So she also knew that Valentine was like starting to get close, but he's very powerful and on campus. So she released a corpse flower in Witherbloom at night to hunt him down and
Wait,
to preferably kill him.
Valentine was starting to get close
Yes.
to
Those are-
figuring out
Yeah,
what
to figuring out
Variety
Lisette.
knew?
Oh,
Mhm.
Oh.
Well, he had his own suspicions about Lisette. And
Gotcha. Okay.
seeing you run out of the Sedgemoor like a year ago was like confirming
And then
things for
seeing
him.
her in his class. Anya is my character and Bryony is
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. So he
Um,
wanted to talk to you to be able to get more information.
interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
So-
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And little thing that you don't know is whenever y'all went to that tavern and I rolled randomly and I was like, "Oh, this is great." Him and Lisette were sitting at a table talking, but you
Mhm.
never like rolled good enough to overhear what they were talking about. They were making like veiled threats at each other. And that was like
That's hot.
the day before.
Yeah, that feels right. Honestly, that's kind of what I thought was happening anyway. Just
Yeah.
because it didn't seem like they had a great working relationship.
Not at all. So she was like, "He's getting too close. I'm going to stick to my MO and just take him out."
Yeah.
And she released something very powerful on Witherbloom that she expected would be powerful enough to kill him, or at least like sap him of a lot of energy so she could finish
Yeah.
the job. And that was the reason that thing was out there, not for you.
So Lisette released that corpse flower. It wasn't just like out there. Because the
Yeah.
big corpse flower in the dungeon had like made babies and stuff, but that's what she was feeding the bodies to.
Mhm.
So okay, that makes sense of why there was just one just out and about on the Witherbloom lawn.
And why y'all
Just
never
hanging out.
found like the point that it erupted from on Witherbloom.
Okay, that makes sense.
Makes
sense.
Ooh, I
Yeah,
love that.
Because
Yeah.
because Anya got yoinked by the corpse flower. Because I had her, there's obviously like there's professors and stuff that patrol Witherbloom at night because there's not supposed to be students out there. So she was sneaking, and I had like a couple of close calls, and then she got there like a little bit early, so Valentine wasn't there. She was supposed to meet like right at midnight. So to not get caught, like we have part of her kind of modified reborn lore is that she like reborns typically don't have to breathe. So I have where like she can stop her breathing for like a few minutes, basically. Like a ring of water breathing ish thing with
Right.
a time limit on it, right? And so I had her hide and stop her heart and stop her breathing for like the few minutes before. It was like 2 or 3 minutes until midnight to wait.
And
for
that was
Valentine.
such a good moment for me as a DM,
And
because
that was
while
to
she's
speed
like,
her up
Yeah.
Yeah.
While she's like sneaking around, I'm like, as a DM, I'm like, okay, the corpse flower is like somewhere over here in Witherbloom. Like, how is it gonna find her? Because she's still a little too close to the path. And then she does that, and I was like, perfect. A little vine just sneaks up and wraps itself
Yeah.
around and drags her like the
Because I
40
remember
feet.
you asking me, like, are you on the path or are you off in the brush? And I was like,
Yeah.
she's in the brush. She's not like, balls deep in the woods, but she is in the brush where she can hide. And you're like, great.
Good.
I was like, oh, cool.
Good.
Uh,
Yoink! Basically. It was
That's so
such a
good.
good fucking moment. And then, like, they fight. Lisette ends up, like, destroying the corpse flower because she's like, now a bunch of students are in Witherbloom and there's witnesses.
Because one of Anya's friends, whose mother is an archfey, Reyna, who's always like big, overarching, like self-insert character from like the Ocean's Pride days.
Yeah.
Is her daughter, one of her daughters, Cora, is Anya's best friend. So Cora has a bunch of fucking artifacts because her mother's the archfey of the Night Court. So she just has buku shit in her room. So she was in a necklace that Anya was wearing because Anya went to go tell her, it's like, hey, if I don't come back, I was at Witherbloom at night. Like it was Valentine and the Sedgemoor kind of thing.
Yeah.
She's like, hey, you're not going by yourself. So she was in a necklace. So Cora had to pop out and we're trying to fight this corpse flower. And it's one of those, it's going tits up. I tried to do so much cool stuff. I was going to stack divine smites. I was going to like, no.
Nothing.
Like, I think that corpse flower was attacking like a quarter of what it could do.
I was using only one of its attacks.
Yeah.
I was like halving the damage, trying to like let the scene play out a little more.
It like figured out we were still alive, and it's just like slapping us with a tent, like it's plant tentacle. Like, ew, leave. You're not dead. Yeah. I don't want you.
Just like a casual little smack.
Spitting a couple rib cages at you, seeing if one of them stabs you. But yeah, like they resolved that fight, and Lisette is trying to pin it all on Valentine and being like, oh, clearly it's the necromancy professor. Like, let me help you investigate.
Corpse, dead, necromancy.
Yeah, branding, marketing, it's all there. Fast forward them doing like all their investigation stuff and finally catching on that it might be Lisette and like Valentine's been missing. So then they queue up like a thing to like break into her office and go past the secret doorway that ends up being her lab. And that's like a big ass dungeon that I designed that is just full of her secret like lab assistants and all her like baby corpse flowers and like the bodies stacked in a room being butchered and just like to prepare to feed to corpse flowers. And so there's a lot of those like elements as they're going into rooms and figuring things out. And then finally they get to like the final battle itself. And like I have Lisette basically get blocked off by like some DMPCs that are more powerful that can take her out because they're like
our guardians,
right now.
Like one of Anya's godfathers, like each of our guardians, was just going like, hey, we're gonna 3v1 the dean, and then
amazing.
You will handle.
Valentine was like on a slab, like being slowly sapped of his health by like the tentacles of a corpse flower being kept in a tank. And there's like baby corpse flowers and other tanks that are going to get released periodically, but they did a really good job of like disabling those. And then they're just trying to free Valentine before this thing kills him because he's like at death's door, basically.
And the fucked up part is it would have killed Valentine, but because Valentine absorbs anything that kills him and comes back to life, he would have just absorbed all of the like life energy, whatever, from that corpse flower that had been crotch mochin on Trodain, the city that were in citizens for God knows how long. So he would have just tripled in size and had to like, so we talked about like hypothetically what happened. Like he would have had to just like hip bump out a wall and chill down there until we could find a way to like help him. Because he can't attack students, like he can't harm students. That's part of his agreement of how he can be on campus. But like, he wouldn't have died. He would have just turned into a bigger monster. But Lisette didn't know that.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a very potential fuck around and find out moment.
Yeah. I had like a whole big ass like monster mini that I was like, just in case he dies, here we go.
There's a bigger Valentine.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Can I see giant Valentine sometimes?
Sure.
Okay. Because Valentine's mini is sick that you put out for him. But I want to see Valentine.
Big Valentine. But yeah, so they're chopping away at him, and then as they're there, like Mariah as a person and as a character expected that like her parents had been turned into reborns and that they were going to face like a whole reborn army.
So I think it's gonna be
that
like,
they
I'm
had
thinking
down
it's gonna be a horde of like reborns, like zombie-esque things that rush in, and we're gonna be fighting them, and then she's gonna see her parents' faces and then freeze. That's sort of what I had prepared for. Now there was a moment earlier where there was like my
There's
character
one room y'all
Anya
didn't go into.
that we didn't go in, which was the resurrection room, which is probably good for my character's state of mind because I think she probably would have just code read it at that point. But like my character Anya and our friend Alyssa's character Jack were kind of rocking through killing all the lab students, and our Bex's character Callista tends to lean more toward like pacifist problem solving solutions, whereas like Anya has temper issues and Jack is a barbarian, so his whole thing is he knows
Our
all
voice of reason character.
So Shui kept one of the lab assistants alive to help get through some of the like, you know, doors and things like that, which Callista actually ended up killing him. And it was like a fucked up moment because it's like, well, Anya would have killed him if Callista wouldn't have, because she's the paladin of a death god who like would not have allowed anyone involved in that to live. But Callista didn't know that.
Amazing.
But like that guy had mentioned something about like someone had asked like, are there people down here to die? And it's like, oh, there's a couple, but there's like that came down a month ago, but now they're stitched together. And so I'm sitting there and I was like, be a motherfucker. That's her parents. What does it mean? And I was like, well, that's bad. So every time we went in a room, I was like, huh? Like looking at the map. And I'm like, what's going to be put on this?
Yeah. And basically it ended up being like, I did a full Metal Alchemist where I was just like, I'm going to fuck it up. And yeah, they were tortured like beyond recognition. And like there were parts of them that couldn't be resurrected, essentially, is like how damaged it was. But it's like if you stitch them together, you got a hole.
There wasn't enough body to reanimate.
Yeah.
That remained of like each of them separately. And they wouldn't reanimate because they wouldn't reanimate without each other and without Anya. And it's like their souls weren't willing to come. Right. And also, like we homebrewed Anya's death god in the like his name's McCall, like he's a creature of our own making. And he's a bit like a Kalimvor and like Critical Role Raven Queen at like blend with some of like my own fun stuff thrown in.
Hell yeah.
But like he is very like not consensual on death. And like he's like, you have like when you die, your soul belongs to him. And he's like, I'm not releasing that fucking soul. So they weren't coming back. So she was able to resurrect Anya, but not her parents. So she had to make the amalgamation.
Ooh. Yeah. I don't know if y'all have read the Locked Tomb series at all.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it. Is it good?
I won't spoil. But I love it.
Okay.
The first book is, I think, one of the easiest to access. The second book challenges a lot of people, and then the third book is like eating dessert. So it's a very interesting, but I've read the first one. I've read Gideon. I need to read Harrow, and I have Harrow. It's on my bookshelf behind me, and then I don't have Nona yet, but I have read Gideon the Ninth, and I love it. I just did Resurrect. Oh no, because the series, it doesn't like the Locked Tomb. It doesn't have the name of any of the books in it. You know?
Yeah.
No, but that's fantastic. I
Necromantic Lesbians in Space.
So good.
So good.
Yeah. I was fortunate that I don't identify with Harrow in terms of like she's very grumpy all the time.
Yeah,
I don't see myself as a super grumpy person, but a lot of her thought processes.
She's very analytical and like And
so the second book was easier for me to get through for that reason because I was like, oh, I understand what's happening.
Yeah, Gideon be doing some wild shit, and I'm like, hey, babe, like. We're in a murder game right now. I'm gonna need you to chill.
You gotta calm down. Yeah, but I won't spoil it then because I think this is in the third book that this happens. But suffice to say, stitching two bodies together to bring them back is reminding me of a scene that is very delicious. So
they basically got like stitched together and also like became an abomination with a corpse flower situation. So it was like this big monstrous corpse flower with the body of them stitched together, like hanging off of the flower.
It's real bad.
And so like that just fucking creeped in there. And I did like a whole slow lead up of like her like trying to get Valentine up and then turning as Jack was at the door, like holding the line with whatever was coming in. and just like
yeah.
one hand and then another, and then there's another set of hands, and then it like comes through.
Well, because we heard like
Good.
dragging, and so Anya thought, oh, 'tis the horde. So she's like, Callista's trying to like keep the Quaby corpse flowers from getting out. Anya's trying to free Valentine. So I'm like, well, if Valentine can fight with us, we'll be fine. Whatever's coming through. If Valentine dies, we're gonna have some bigger issues. And he's not going to he can probably still fight with us, but he won't have his cognitive, wherewithal at all. And that would just be very bad. So, like, Jack Barbarian, hey, go call the line against the zombie horde, please. Because I'm thinking he's just going to be hacking through undead. And I'm like, hey, that flesh is going to give way. You're going to be fine. And so we see the hand, like one hand, two hand wrap around, and it start to pull itself. And then the dungeon's big. So it took like a round and a half to get from where Valentine was to the door. And so by the time Anya realized that she had fucked up and telling Jack to go to the door, Jack has a chain tattoo. And so he had chained himself to the floor so he could just kind of fight and not get buffeted. And Anya was like, hey, come the fuck back. And then I turned and I had rolled like 2 or 3 2s in a row. So it's like, again, I tried to stack some really cool shit to get through like the last vine or 2 to free Valentine. It was going to be great. She was like, she's coming into her like power as a vengeance paladin of the death god. Like it's got fucking whiffs it. Absolutely. And then turns and sees this like corpse flower mom-dad amalgamation. Which the fucked up part is like Jack's character knew Varen, Anya's dad, because he was like, he did a lot of like artificer, government contracting, making weird weapons of war in his fucking Tingri basement. Like, so she recognized like Jack recognized like a quarter of the creature's face that was her dad. Because it was like one of her dad's eyes, one of her mom's eyes, like half the mouth. Like they're just patched together.
Just fucked up. Just mad fuck.
And so Jack was just like, I'm not going to say anything because I'm polite enough to not be like, hey, is that your dad's left eye? But then, like Anya screams. Like I couldn't do the scream because it was like 4 in the morning and all his mom was asleep.
Right.
And then just like falls to the floor. Bex's character, Callista, ends up getting Valentine free. And there was a really cool moment where Anya's death god McCall kind of used Valentine as like a conduit to step in and like come into the space physically. And so like he handed Anya her sword and her helm, put it on her and pulled her up, and was basically like, grieve later, go kill the fucking thing. And then, which was so good. It's the best session of D&D I've ever played, genuinely.
Very
like
good.
I'm not just saying that because I always met best friend and we're on a podcast together, but it was also very funny because there was a round where just Valentine was like, hey, get the fuck away from the door, effectively. And everybody got a free disengage and dodge.
Say fucking less.
By all means. Yeah. They was like, hey, everyone gets a free round to move the fuck away from the horrible thing and it can't hit you. So that happened. Everybody got out of the way. And then I was like, hey, no one touch me. Because I was like, hey, I want to kill the thing quickly. I don't have to hack and slash away at this giant abomination that was my parents at one point. And so he like ripped it apart, and then she stabbed her sword through the heart, which is like how they reanimated. Basically, that heart that was in that creature is the same as her heart. Like those same runes are carved into her heart, which is fucked up and lovely. And then there's a lot of trauma ensued.
I have to give claps. That's an amazing horror scenario, and
it's
I
so
now
good.
completely understand why you approached me and were like, I'm
like, hey,
afraid of going and hurting my players. But excellent. There's no. It sounds
we've
like
been
there's a
building to it.
Time.
Yeah, and then I like playing Anya dark. So after they had chained up Lisette, it was kind of like Mariah had the idea of like, hey, this person needs to be made not able to cast. But we had to say over table that it was McCall that gave Anya the idea, because I don't think my college freshman Loka would know how to like neutralize a caster, but a death god would, and I do. So I was like, hey, Anya cuts out her tongue and cuts off both her hands.
Yeah.
In front of the party.
Yeah.
And her guardian. And they're in like Jack's brothers watch that. He's like, damn, all right. Shit.
Yeah, that's fucked up. All right.
She about it.
Yeah. That's fucked up, but again, all of this was fucked up.
She can be in the weird because all of our guardians are in that secret organization that Anya's mom and Lisette were in. So, and we are now actually also in it too, because we were like kind of
You were like,
involved in
hey,
the
you
war
saw
crime.
it too much.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's so
And
good.
so now like we're role playing an interrogation scene with like Ale is playing the Queen Octavia who runs the organization. I'm playing Anya. Ollie's also playing Lisette. And then our friend Oak is the human is playing his character Oak, who is like a watcher, information broker. Like Scary Oak hits different because does some fucked up. He's like stabbed this one with purple knitting needles. Like
Yes.
it's wild.
He's a
out here.
He's a wonderful, wonderful DM and a wonderful
Yeah.
player, and like
Not afraid to throw down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that
Amazing.
character that like will give you magical candy, and then will also stab out someone to death that hurt you with purple knitting needles. And like, what
Good.
else can you ask for?
Yeah.
Excellent. That's fantastic. I would love to share a horror story time
Yeah.
in return.
Please
if that
do.
Yes.
Please do.
This was just one of my favorite. I was so thankful and proud and grateful of my GM for orchestrating this over a very long time. This was in a zombie outbreak campaign, but it's more like it's not super about zombies in this
They
case,
never are.
so-
The zombie campaigns
yeah.
never end up being about zombies.
Yeah. Like, listen, this does feature one very heavily, but if you,
We're good.
you'll
It's
see.
fine.
You'll
I
see.
can set zombie scaries. It's fine.
So I have a character who is very dear to me. She's followed me through a few seasons now, even past her own death. So that was fun.
Hey.
She started as a person named Polly who had been born after the apocalypse had happened. So this was her whole life. This was all that she had seen. And at some point in the campaign that we had, she was in a building that exploded. And although she got out of the way of some of the blast, she was rendered deaf through that explosion. And I'm always very interested in exploring certain themes of disability as someone who is disabled, has chronic pain kind of thing. I always love to go through those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so my DM was very wonderful to explore that with me. And it ended up working into the horror in this pretty cool way. In that she's recovering at this place that is like a colony of the undead who have some kind of like thought to them, you know? And
interesting.
she is really good. She's walking all around being essentially very moody because she can't escape. She can't get out because if she tries to escape, this other faction is going to like, shoot on sight because people are afraid of the undead.
Yeah, they think everyone in there is like a mindless zombie.
Exactly.
Even though like they're infected, they still
yeah.
They're
And she's not a zombie at all. She's just there, circumstance.
Like, I'm just deaf. And I'm here for some reason.
But so she's there for a little while, and then all of a sudden, on this compound type area, my GM describes that suddenly, for the first time in like 3 weeks, a month, you hear something, and it's in this house, and I'm like, "Holy shit!"
Hate.
Okay.
Already hate.
I don't consent. I want to be deaf again. I take it back.
I would like to unhear. Thank you.
I put on noise canceling.
He's like, hey, you hear this? And you're like, mute.
I don't.
No, I don't.
No, I don't.
It's music. It's creepy music.
Okay.
He plays it out loud, and it's like, like tinkly little piano music as it always has to be. But of course, she has to investigate because it's the first thing that it's very out of the ordinary, And she also has, been plunged into this in a world that essentially doesn't have accessibility support either. So, that's its own issue. And she heads into this house, and the music grows stronger, and she's looking through and eventually finds her way to the attic, where there is a little girl.
No.
Very clearly.
No.
Not alive.
Go back.
Who has her hands like this over her face.
Okay, a zombified little girl or a little girl that's just not alive?
No, a zombified little girl.
Okay.
She's there. And that's when my character suddenly realizes that she's not hearing. This person is hearing and somehow has connected with her mind and is transmitting the sound to her.
Oh, thank you.
And
Non-consensual
the first
telepathy.
thing
Not
that
essential telepathy.
the first thing that this little girl says when my character walks in is, "I like your face.
Hate it.
Can we
No.
play?" So,
Great.
she's very scary, but she also is like a door to something that my character is worried about not having access to anymore.
Yeah.
And really interesting concept, actually, very far down the line in the seasons when this character gets brought back. New name, new undead life, is able to communicate through sign, which was also very interesting. But back to here. She stays with this girl because she wants to explore this as things get creepier and creepier. This is the instance where I talked at that panel about getting screamed at. It was by this little girl character when my character went away for a couple of days and she got very angry and upset.
That's fair.
And at one point, the compound gets raided. And the little girl, whose name is Providence, says, "I can take you somewhere safe. Don't worry. I'm going to keep us safe. You just have to trust me and come with me." And my character's like, "I
have no other
okay.
options.
It's like, you're
I
a
don't-
child, but we are in the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
Somehow you can magically transmit sound to me, so you might be the authority here.
You might be the authority." So she follows her through this very tight, dark tunnel that is under the house. Again, my GM
Claustrophobia.
playing on my claustrophobia fears.
Bad
Excellent.
start.
We finally make it all the way through, and I plunge down into a pool of water, and I'm very disoriented. I don't know where I am or what's happening. And I, again, grew up in the apocalypse, never learned how to swim. So am beginning to drown, but finally am able to like pull myself out. And warning for the listeners for body horror and gore here. She pulls herself out of the water and is met with the removed and rotting faces of other young women
Oh, no.
on the ground. And then she turns and she sees Providence finally with her hands down from her face. And there's no face there.
No.
And she says, "I really like your face."
Providence, no. I didn't think that was
That's
just a
so
compliment.
good, though.
I was so scared.
That's so good.
I knew that shit wasn't a compliment. I was like, she's gonna take her fucking skin.
I was like, that's some stranger shit. Like,
Yeah.
but
That's
oh,
so
yeah.
good.
And
That's
so
very good.
She kept her face, notably, because
Okay.
our dad, in strong quotes, he's just
Zombie
like,
dad?
the charismatic cult leader of the place, comes forward and is like, "Hey, no, we don't take people's faces." This was another
face down.
player
Put
in the
that face
game.
down.
Put it down. And it was a really interesting choice for me and my character because I was like, this person, she does love, Providence did love Polly, who then changed her name to Kane in a very fucked up horror
In
type
her,
way.
like, in the only way that she was
Exactly,
kind
in
of
the only way
allowed
she knows
to.
how. And so then my character is like faced with this choice of like, what do I do? And she actually ended up like just being like, "You did a very bad thing. If we're gonna stay friends, you can never do this again."
That's fair.
And
you can't try to take my face if we're
you
going to stay
can't try to
friends.
take my face
Hey,
again.
Providence, if you take my face, we can't play together anymore.
If you've got to take a face, you've got to take somebody
You
else.
gotta
I
pick a
need
struggle.
that.
Pick a fucking struggle, Providence.
I need that face. The removal process of the I will not survive, and then we
I
can't
need
play.
this one. It was great though, because actually that friendship with Providence was what enabled my character to be able to die and return later, is because Providence was like, "No, I'm still obsessed with you. You can't be dead."
That's fair.
Which
Providence
was
like, I
very
have
fun.
one good thing, and it's you. And
yeah, and
I
it's
didn't
this
even
one
get your
bitch whose
face.
face I didn't steal.
Yeah, I don't even have your
Yeah.
face to remember you by. You're gonna have to come back. I'm so sorry.
Exactly. But yeah, shout out to Knoxweiler Burf, most creepy GM I've ever played with. So scary.
Incredible. So did the cult leader like know that Providence was taking people's faces?
No. So he knew that she was there and she was kind of one of his like children.
Right.
He was trying to take my character as like kind of one of his children as well,
Yeah.
and she was being difficult. But
my real dad.
he didn't find this chasm of faces, we'll say, until he was looking for my character because she had disappeared while this raid was happening, and he was like, "Oh, we need to make sure that Holly is okay." And then she was like, "I'm not okay.
Not okay. It's
There's a girl with a knife.
She's trying to eat me.
She's trying to eat me." Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god. Did you
Oh,
ever
that's
find
so
out
good.
how Providence could transmit the sound, or was that always kind of left
Yes.
unknown?
Okay. So big lore. This is
I
you
love
can
a
go
good lore
watch
dump.
this show.
Mhm.
Is
But
this the one that you were? Yeah, it's the zombie live play that you were on. Yeah,
This
because
is
I
the
think
live
I've seen like an episode of it, and you were so good. So I'm like, now I need to go binge watch this.
It's very
But-
sweet. It's I'll show you all it's aired on different channels, so I'll give you all of the ways to get to it.
Yes, please do.
But so big spoilers, but we found out sometime in the second season, and then of course all those characters died. So third season we came in with none of that knowledge, you know. We found out that the zombie virus that happens in the show is not a virus in the way that most media approaches it, but rather came from aliens who were
Oh.
interested in seeing if infecting humanity with this virus would be able to elevate their consciousness. And so, yes, it turns you into the undead, but it also
Makes you smart.
opens your mind into different things that you can do. And so some people would mutate into like large hulking creatures and like their strength would be upped. And then some, a very small portion, are able to enhance their mental abilities and connect with others through the mutual infection of this virus. So my character,
Mindy.
yeah, my
I heard
character in rebellion to someone at one point had eaten an infected fruit, and so had just enough of the virus inside her to be able to make that connection.
Just a little bit,
which was-
Zambino. Just a little zombie spice.
Which is great. Yeah.
I just ate
Yeah.
a moldy strawberry one day and I could do telekinesis.
And
That would
now I
happen to
can
me.
telepathically connect. Yeah, and it's a very interesting concept in terms of like what's dead. Does it ever truly die? Is a big question.
Yeah.
Does it ever truly leave? Are we ever truly gone? Is a big question of it. There's a big plot with like husks. Like there's a heart inside of you, and that is very difficult to destroy. As long as that is never destroyed, the capability of someone to come back is very strong. It's very hard.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's neat.
That is
It's also like, as a side tangent, like interesting about like the kind of the intelligence of like bacteria and different like mold and things, like in The Last of Us, where like the kind of, it's not mold, is it mold? Something.
It's fungus.
Cordyceps, fungus.
Fungus.
Mhm.
Yeah, the intelligence like fungi of like the network and stuff. So if you step on like a patch of it, then the horde can come and like they can follow the network and know where you are, and like stuff like that is
Yes.
really interesting.
It's really neat. Yeah, we
also
had a
the
guest
scary shit
character.
of like an actual fungus being able to do that to like small spiders and ants and
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm gonna zombie control this body and just get myself to where a bird will eat me so I can control the bird. And
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, we need to contain
That's just
that.
your
hoe.
that's just your
Let's just
nightmare.
shut it down.
Or it starts with like birds gradually have bigger things, but it's just the fungi
more
gradually
birds.
inhabiting bigger and bigger things until they get up to a human. Yeah.
I love it.
Can't do it. Yeah. That was like horrific true facts that I learned by like doing a Walking Dead deep dive. And I was like, why
Ooh,
does
yeah.
this exist? Why is that like a real thing? I don't know.
the amount to which things evolve to survive and succeed is a horrifying concept and ripe for horror, in fact.
Yes, truly.
Absolutely.
Because the
Mhm.
scientific community is real chill about just being like, it probably won't happen to humans. And I'm like, hey, that's not the degree
I don't
of
like
reassurance
probably.
that I wanted from you.
I need a
Yeah.
100%. I
I
know
need
that
a
science
yeah.
doesn't work in 100%, but I'm going to
Yeah.
need it in this one circumstance.
Yeah. Or like the that whole fact of just like we started exploring the ocean and we're like, hey, we have no business down there. Let's go to space instead.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Just
think
be
they
like, yeah,
found
no, it's
Cthulhu. I think they found Cthulhu and they were like, hey, that's not like, there was one person with common sense. It's like, hey, you know what? That's not our business. We're gonna leave now, have a
Yeah.
nice existence.
Yeah.
And
Let's
we
let
went
that guy
to space
sleep.
instead.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
went on a little submarine, an eyeball the size of like the moon opened, and you're like, okay,
Opened.
cool. We're just
You're
not
like,
gonna.
hey,
Bye.
That's
we're not gonna touch
enough.
that.
That's
See, I
enough
feel like-
exploration.
I feel like the first time like a huge giant squid washed up on a beach, that should have been our hint.
That
you
was
know?
all the
Like, that should have
information
been
we
the cue.
needed.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like, take your manifest destiny shit and put it away.
Yeah,
That's
put it
not
away.
for you.
the fact that the ye old maps that were just scribbling little sea monsters are probably correct.
They were
We have
right.
Yeah.
We can't say that they were just funny guys doodling on maps. Like, no, that bitch was out there.
Like, no. The Leviathan and Cthulhu are down in the Marianas Trench having a tea party and you interrupted them.
Yeah,
And it's time to go now.
You gotta go.
put this
Let
bitch in
sleeping
reverse and turbo that
Cthulians
shit
lie.
on.
That's not your business. It's just not your business. Like, some things aren't our business, and that's one of them.
So true. Mm.
Or like the articles that you read where it's like, hey, we broke into this tomb that was like
Stop
rumored
it.
to be hella haunted,
Stop-
and we
put
just
it back.
cracked open that sarcophagus, and I'm like,
yeah.
whose old ass uncle decided that this was the thing to do?
It's
Stop
always
it
a white
now.
person. You've never seen a person with a drop of melanin in their skin do that shit. And like, I'm aware that I'm very pale, but I have a Cajun grandmother, so I know better. I was
Mhm.
raised to know better. I drove over
Listen.
the Chaffee Basin as a child. There's some shit in that water that you can't see that can see you.
Yes.
And like, no, stop it. Like, people who just digs up
Don't get in
things
there.
in the woods and take it home with you.
No.
And it was like, okay, well, you're gonna die in a month. It's been
That's
nice
there for
knowing
a
you.
reason.
God.
I think the worst, the most horrifying like fact I learned about if there's anything that white people will have, it is full audacity. Is
Yes.
that the Victorians loved to go to Egypt, grab mummies, and then eat them.
Why?
Eat them.
Why?
Mhm.
And then they were like, oh, but those people over there are the cannibals. And it's like, no, it's fully you. You're
Like-
eating people right now.
Yeah.
Why-
so
why-
not
why
only
would you
that,
do
you're
that?
eating a long rotten person.
Thousands years dead people. What?
Who pitched that? Who was the first person with that idea? They walked someone and presented it. They didn't have PowerPoint then, so they just
No.
stood up there and pitched that idea. And they were like, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. Why?
You motherfucker, I'm in. No.
What's
You
fucking
had-
helpful is I also learned that factoid from those little cat history videos that have been going
Same.
on TikTok.
Yeah, Sam.
History videos?
Oh my goodness, it's incredible. It's a channel that does like it explains to you little like true facts about history that are fucking buck wild with
Uh-huh.
all of
With like
you know
the
how people
cat
do
memes
cuts?
where the cat's like
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
the
cats are
jiggly
dancing.
cats.
So it's an incredibly useful way to find out a lot of shit that is true about history.
It really
in
softens
the
a very
blow.
relatable way.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I just had to raw dog that fact when I got it. I just had a YouTuber be like, hey, welcome to life. It's hell now. And I was like,
I think someone
no.
told me that in college, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to stare at the wall for a few minutes. Please leave me alone.
I'll find
That's
you one
awful.
of the cat videos and send it to you.
Bad.
Yes,
It's
please.
bad
Yes,
here.
please do.
It's great. Well, we've definitely gone hella over on our time, but this has been so
This has been
great.
so fun.
This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and being a little horror goblin with us. This is great.
Yes.
Yeah, give us one last time a little shameless plug about where people can find you, and if you've got any exciting projects that are coming up, feel free to plug away.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, I have been Sarah. The thing I forgot to say in the beginning was that my pronouns are they, them. So if you want to
Mhm.
come and like spew adoration at me, just, know that. Sarah's Coffee everywhere on the internet. Sarah_is_coffee on Instagram. And I don't have anything upcoming to plug, but since I've talked about it a lot here, go and check out Outbreak Undead. The first 2 seasons, I believe, are over on Hyper RPG's channel, and then the last season is on Pixel Circus's channel. If you like horror and you like really fucked up interpersonal relationships with 2 actors staring very deeply into each other's eyes, that's the show for you.
The good shit. Incredible. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you guys for listening. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
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 Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddysite.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.